Welcome to the Uncommon CEO podcast, where we unpack the mindset, skills, and wisdom it takes to become an uncommon leader in a common world. With your host, the Uncommon CEO himself, Andrew Smart.
Andrew, welcome. Next episode of the Uncommon CEO podcast. What's new in your world?
Matt, I'm doing well. Just staying busy. How about yourself?
Yeah, the same. It's about to turn the corner into spring, which is about my favorite time of year. So excited about that. Get out, finally, the yard landscaping back to normal, plant some things. It'll be good. Looking forward to all that.
It's that crazy time of year that, in this area that we go from, we can have a 60-degree week and then still get some cold.
Oh, yeah. It was sleeting 2 nights ago, and it's 68 degrees out right now.
Yeah, I wish you would just pick a temperature.
Make up your mind,
right.
Weather.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, personally, I just rather stay in the 60s rather than go back. Once I've moved past the cold, for me, once you get past Christmas, I'm ready to get warm.
Yeah, I like the medium warm, not the baking.
No.
Summer. Yeah.
The July and August time. No,
it's not.
That's the humidity. That's the South Carolina humidity. I'm not crazy about that. But I do like a nice warm. But also it leads right into the pollen season. So that's and so my car is black, so it becomes yellow.
Absolutely.
And the minute you wash it, it just
comes right back.
It comes right back. So, but it is a good time of year. Drew's doing flag football, and he'll be playing contact football this fall, but he's doing flag football right now. So he's full speed in that, and they're both still in swimming, and Claire's doing volleyball. So they're staying very active. How about yours?
Oh, yeah. Graham started basketball a few weeks ago for the first time ever, and we thought his team was going to be awful. We're like, these poor kids aren't going to win a game the whole year. They started 7-0 and took their first loss this past weekend, but it was the Jazz. They're pretty stacked for a nine-year-old kid's basketball team. But yeah, he's enjoyed doing that. And little Josie, I think, wants to do gymnastics or something along those lines.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, they're having fun, and summer will kick around and give us lots of excuses to be outdoors and hike and all kinds of stuff.
Awesome. You get your pool open.
Yeah. This year will hopefully be better than last year. Last year I was fighting pea soup for about 2 months there, and this year I did a better job of preparing, keeping it covered, keeping the pump running throughout the off season. So
that's hard. I had to deal with that one time. When you get that algae, you're constantly fighting that stuff.
That's the truth.
Yeah, so I know exactly what you went through, and so I'm glad to hear that about your son's basketball team. I remember talking with you about that before on another podcast. And we kind of laughed and joked about church basketball because, church basketball gets a little rowdy there with the crowd.
Yeah, sometimes
they don't always have that church behavior.
Yes, there's no love of the Lord when it's time to guard somebody.
Right.
So, yep,
exactly. So, excited to be back with you and enjoy this time together where we get to share on topics and talk about things that are uncommon. And so today, we're always talking about different elements of leadership, different topics that surround what makes people, organizations, what makes us, uncommon, uncommon people that serve in different ways. And so I've been working on, this idea of mindset for a long time. And I shared with you before in a podcast that, last year I really started honing in on mindset and driving, mindset into the organization that I did with our top leadership. I drove this mindset mentality through organization, and I believe that mindset is everything. Where goes your mind, goes everything. And so I really wanted to take this time to continue that approach on mindset and to talk about a particular topic that has been kind of really been on my mind lately.
Mm-hmm.
So you ready to go?
Oh, of course.
Okay. So in we've talked a lot about really how our relationships interact, right? We've talked a lot about how we interact, as individuals, how we connect as people, and so as we connect as people, our brain kind of flows in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you remember when we were talking in a previous podcast about Chris Voss's book?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the topics that in the book we talked about mirroring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what do you remember about that?
Yeah, essentially in negotiations, you want to mirror the person that you're negotiating with. That could be in your demeanor, it could be in your tone, but essentially you want them to feel at ease because you're giving back what they're putting out.
Yeah, right. So we wanted to, in that negotiation side, you want to physically and mentally, you want to mirror this process. Well, a phrase that I want to give you in a true reality is called a mirror neuron system.
Okay.
So we know the word mirror, but when you hear neuron system, what comes to your mind?
Oh, the brain and the synapses firing and all that good stuff.
Yeah, the neuron system. Okay, so the brain. Okay, and so when we talk about mirror neuron system, we model behavior. Okay, everything that Chris Voss was talking about is dealing with our brain. We model behavior. So the mirror, neuron system is we model the behavior of the people we spend the most time with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so who do you spend the most time with, Matt?
Well, sometimes people at work. That's 8 hours of my day or so at work. My family, of course. Those are the main people. Some of my best friends, we spend good amounts of time together, but probably colleagues at work and family the most.
So when you reflect in thinking about that, what types of behaviors do you think about that you model of those people that you spend the most time with?
Well, I definitely catch my coworkers saying some of my catchphrases that they've modeled for me, and they catch themselves doing it. It's like, God, I'm talking like him now. So that's always, I get a kick out of that. But, generally, when you got kids, you've got to get to their level to be able to communicate effectively with them a lot of times, And even just in the way you talk, on the words you use, you're going to mirror a little bit of what other people are going to understand or what they find important. So all those things, but generally you mimic compassion and love for those that you spend the most time with. And I think that's the main thing that gets communicated across.
Well, you if you spend your time around people who are compassionate and loving,
yeah, true,
you'll mirror that. Well, what if you spend your time around assholes?
You'll be a jerk too. You think that's the normal way of being,
right?
And sometimes at work, you can't choose your colleagues and you can't choose your family. So those are two areas that you just got to cross your fingers you got lucky on.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to being school children.
Mm-hmm.
If you hang around the bully, what are you most likely to be?
Yeah, bully.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're going to mirror that behavior. You see it with your kids. I mean, we talked about this before. Your children tend to mirror and model who they associate with.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important as parents that we pay attention to who our children associate with. I mean, we want to raise our children to be leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're a good parent, you want to raise your children to be a leader, not a follower. Now, they're naturally going to follow at some level, but you want your children to be a leader too.
Mm-hmm.
And you want them to, whatever areas they do follow, you want to make sure they follow into a good group.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're definitely going to mirror to whatever association that they're a part of. And you're right. We pick up just natural things like you said, you pick up words and behaviors and patterns. We do it without even knowing it. I think about all the time of just words that I've picked up from just hanging around people and habits. Okay. We had a podcast on habits. How many good and probably more bad habits have we picked up from people?
Oh, yeah. I mean, most of your habits are picked up from those that you surround yourselves with. I mean, people that smoke, people that drink too much, tends to be your environment and surroundings guide those habits.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a person who likes to be healthy, eat healthy, do healthy things, but your group of people don't, and your buddies like to go out every night and do those kind of things, and that's that kind of influence, you kind of mirror and go into that pattern. It's no different than, you get a pattern of someone who brings in, donuts every day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, those tend to be mirrored patterns. And so, we mirror those type of patterns. There's also another word that I want you to think about called emotional contagion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about that the other day.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, emotions spread throughout the room, throughout the organization, etc. So, I mean, if somebody storms in a room angry, the ability for that to spread is just as strong as if somebody comes in with the right mentality to try to, guide a positive environment to be around.
We're emotional people, right?
Mm-hmm.
The biggest part of our brain, our limbic brain, is the emotional part of our brain. We're emotional people. So our emotions dictate so much of our actions, whether we want to admit to it or not. I mean, I'll go back to something that I, in the talk with Chris Voss, actually something that I didn't actually talk about in that podcast. All of our decisions, okay, we'll go back to business, okay, we use a lot of data, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we throw out words like KPIs, right?
Yep.
I mean, we love to measure performance. We love to bring in data and information. The more we can get, it's like it just makes us feel better with more data that we can grab.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the funny thing about data. Data isn't how we make the decision. Okay, we grab data. We grab information, all of it. But how do we make the decision?
Emotions, your gut sometimes. You still got to have a feeling for it.
Every decision is emotionally made.
Mm-hmm.
You go buy a house, okay? You go buy a house. You are going to grab every data that you can. You're going to know what it costs. You're going to have every data point of what it costs. You're going to know where it is. You're going to know all the things, what schools. You're going to know taxes. You're going to know everything. But the point of making that decision is going to be based on whether you or your partner, everything is going, how does it feel?
Mm-hmm.
When you buy a car, the ultimate decision is going to be, how does it feel?
Mm-hmm.
Everything ultimately is driven by the emotional point of, how does it feel?
Yeah. I mean, there may be a better or different car or house out there that's in your price range, but at the end of the day, you can only pick one. And you got to, most people look at multiple houses when they decide to buy a house. And one's going to win. And that's usually because that's the one that you fell in love with, or however it's framed up.
How about this? Have you ever, think about this. You're with your wife. You're making a decision. You get down to the final point of making a decision. Have you ever heard this statement? I don't know, dear. How do you feel about it?
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to, how do you feel?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, well, I think we need to look deeper on the spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm. Let's review this data one more time.
Right. Let's go. Yes, all those points matter, but it always comes back to, how do you feel? And so feelings dictate ultimately everything. How do you feel about it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, all these other points matter. All of them do. but it ultimately comes back to a feeling. So let's go back to emotional contagion. Okay, so where does emotional contagion play out into how we operate in our environment?
Well, every day you have the opportunity to have a positive or a negative interaction with somebody. And when you're a leader of a team, your team's going to take what you're giving them. So if you lead with optimism and positivity, you're more than likely going to get a team that also follows that. But if you start, when somebody starts griping about something in a room, I mean, misery loves company. People just jump on board. So you have the opportunity to set the tone at all times.
Yeah. So ultimately what you want to be in life, if we can just kind of summarize this, what we ultimately want to be around a life is people who emotionally, that while we want to emotionally have the contagion that we spread good emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we have, that people generally look at us and say, you know what, that person spreads good vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's ultimately, I mean, you don't want, at the end of the day, for people to go around saying, God, that person's just freaking miserable.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want that.
No.
I mean, I would hope you wouldn't want that, but, ultimately that's what you want in any type of team, organization, family, any type of structure. That's what you should want. And if you don't want that, then you better go back to that other mirror principle and look yourself in the mirror.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what you should want. Knowing all that, I want to come to a term called learn minimalization. I've really been studying this term, and I've been studying this term in multiple ways. I've been studying this term in some books I've read. I've been studying this word in the Bible as well. Okay? There's a guy in the Bible called Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
You might have heard of him.
Yeah, he's been around.
Yeah, he was around about 3,000 years ago. He was around a long time ago. Historically speaking, he was considered the wisest and wealthiest guy in history. When you have everything, okay, and I mean everything, you kind of go to God and say, well, I got everything. What else can I ask for? Well, if you got everything, then he goes and asks for wisdom. Okay, kind of profound question. I mean, God, I've got everything. So how about some wisdom? And so, and in gathering, quote, knowledge, wisdom, he learned a few things. And so that book that I studied called Ecclesiastes is a hard book. It's a very, very hard book. It's a profound book, but it's very hard. And it helped me kind of research this term minimalization. Now, when you hear this term minimalize, what do you think about?
Oh, I mean, having less, being more focused with what you have, making the small things go further, all that.
But Matt, isn't that counterintuitive to this mindset of growth, go big, go home, bigger, better?
Yeah, it is, but it's do more with less. So you can still grow and have accomplishments and accolades and all that, but you don't need excess for that.
But that's not what society tells us.
That's true.
That goes against everything that society tells us. I mean, that, and it's kind of funny. I mean, actually society would tell you, Matt, you should do that. Get yours. Go more. Now, we've talked about this. I mean, Biggie Smalls said, more money, more problems.
Yes, this is true. The sage philosopher,
Right.
Biggie
Smalls, yes. I mean, but where we actually have, interesting enough, inside of us, whether we want to admit it or not, we actually fight a desire for more.
Oh, absolutely. Because we've been taught more is better. And then your whole life you've seen people trying to get everything they can, make more money, have more friends, have bigger houses, faster cars, all that.
Yeah,
So,
we have a natural consumption mindset.
yeah.
We want to consume. We want more. I mean, my daughter, like I said, she's into this slime stuff.
Yeah, my kids too. I don't get it.
Helping this girl make a fortune, this YouTube girl. And if she gets one container, she wants another container.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's more. You get one thing, you want nothing, and more. And so we fight a natural, part of us that desires for more.
Mm-hmm.
But what is this learned minimalization? So I wrote down the secret to genius is what? Okay. Every genius, every entrepreneur, every person that we look at, that we put in that category, you know what they've done?
What's that?
They've created simplicity.
Mm-hmm. I could see that.
That's what they've done. Every genius, okay? Everyone that when we look at, Steve Jobs, what did he do?
I mean, he created the personal computer essentially and created a way to make it easy to the average person is why it succeeded.
Where do you have an iPhone?
Yeah.
Okay. Where's all your music stored?
On the phone, in the cloud, I guess.
Movies, music, information.
It's all in this little brick.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he figured out how to monetize it, but,
Yeah.
but he also figured out how to simplify it.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, and I'm just using him as an example.
Yeah, I was actually thinking Bill Gates when I was talking, but yeah, same scenario. Both of them.
Bill Gates
found
did the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same thing. When you look at every genius, they figured out a way to simplify something, how to make something simpler. And I mean, that's the whole mindset of genius, how to make something simpler.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back to this slime deal. My daughter, who now has no problem spending my money on this slime, you know what she used to do?
What's that?
Make the damn stuff.
Oh, yeah. I believe it.
She used to make a mess in the kitchen making stuff. But guess what? She found a simpler way. Spend Dad's money.
True.
Buy it. Buy it. Simplicity. But, this learned simplicity. So when we look at, learned simplicity and what is the power of learned simplicity? Why is it that simplicity actually, why does that make us really better? What is it about simplicity? What is it? And I'm going to come back to Solomon because here's this guy who said, hey, I really could use wisdom I've got all this other stuff, but wisdom's what I need. Mm-hmm. What is it that he learned? Why simplicity?
Well, I mean, the closer the decision points are, the more accurate it tends to be. You can draw a straight line a lot quicker than you can go back and forth and all around. When we always talk about things like how the crow flies, it's the straightest, simplest path possible. It's like the Occam's razor. It's the most in-your-face, obvious solution tends to be the right solution. So there's something to be said about simplicity.
In the book of Ecclesiastes, you go through a process of that book. And when you read it from the very first chapters, you see a man talk about all the things that he's experienced in life. Okay, you see a man talk about, I've gotten all this, and I've had all the relationships that I could have, and then some. Back then, he had a lot of wives. Talking about having to do. I heard Dan Leanne say at one time, he's like, imagine having to have 2 anniversaries every day.
Oh, geez, yeah, that'd be a lot to keep up with there.
Whew. And he's got all of that. He's got palaces to take care of. He just has everything at that time in life that you could experience, monetarily. He has received all this stuff, okay? But he's realizing all this stuff that he has gone and experienced and had, he's found empty. And so he's walking through this process that I've gone through life and all this experience, and I have all this abundance. But I also have emptiness in abundance. And he's looking for where's value? He's trying to find value. And he goes through this process of this book of learning where real value is. For him, for him, it was like, okay, having all this means nothing. No relationships, no friendships, no palaces, no nothing. If I don't have God in any of these kind of things, none of it really is. There's no value without him in this. That's where he's kind of finding, this. And so he's trying to boil it down to a simple point for him. Without God, there's nothing. So he's simplifying all of this. Now, what you also find in this, he never states that while I'm simplifying this, I'm not taking away my responsibility in it. Okay, so that is another point. He doesn't go, hey, God, take it all away. That's not what he's saying. He's saying I didn't find, that in all of this in itself, I'm not finding joy and happiness. That I'm not finding that collecting things or where purpose is. Simplicity. Funny thing, Steve Jobs was the same way. Can you tell me the two things that mattered to Steve Jobs the most?
Family.
That's one.
Trust.
For him, it was family. And he enjoyed good sushi and food.
Ah, yes, good food. I'm a sucker for that.
But those are the things he really kind of appreciated and valued. Steve Jobs didn't have he had a nice home, but not a big home. Warren Buffett lives in the same home that he lived in since 1960.
What was it? Bill Gates drove his old Camry until it hit 300,000 miles or something.
I think Warren Buffett still goes to McDonald's every morning. You look at, and we're using kind of big people here. Elon Musk got rid of all his big homes and lives. It's where you find purpose and passion and those kind of things, and the simplicity. And it's not about not having things. It's that. What is it that really matters? Okay? It's this learn minimalization. It's about focusing in on the things that matter. And I think about this in business. And I think about this in relationships. And I think about this in teams. Think about this. How many times do we, in our organization, get focused on the things that don't matter?
Oh, all the time.
And we spend all of our energy in them.
It derails the whole planning process.
Yes. Yeah. We spend so much energy on these other things that don't matter. Rather than focusing on the things that do matter. And, if we learn to minimize and hone in on the things that matter, that's where real success is. In all these arenas, in all these areas. So when we talk about, minimalism, we talk about it, and what it means for success. Okay, the number one reason, for success is that people focus on things that have high, potential for consequences. Okay.
There's the part of it could be the big risk, big reward, but that you're making decisions that have impact is what it means at the end of the day. Because consequence can be positive, consequence can be negative, but you're taking a risk when you do it. And when you take risks, you grow from them.
So let's talk about some tangible things that could be put into that category of high risk. Let's talk business. High risk.
Absolutely. When you want to grow, sometimes you got to be willing to blow it all up. So, a new company, our company would be a good example, where when we were at a point of growth and inflection to take on a very large client that we might not have been ready for, but they gave us an absolute opportunity to better ourselves and become much more revenue generating. You had to take the big risk to do it.
I'll give a great example. Yeah. When in this business, when I I mean, years ago when we took on Sam's.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's a great example. So when we took on Sam's, that was a huge risk, and one that, candidly speaking, one that wasn't calculated very well. Didn't necessarily have a team that thought through it as properly as it should have. But as a leader and as a CEO, you take this process. We got into it, and then figured out how to make it happen. And what I had to do, I basically had to minimize, the issues around it and solve the problem. But ultimately, I mean, what did it do?
Well, ultimately, we wouldn't be where we are now if it weren't for that decision. If we wouldn't have taken that risk, we never would have been able to get the working capital to grow. We wouldn't have gotten a team that understood how to push themselves to work outside of the regular constraints that we have. I think by that decision, it caused tremendous growth, not just from a revenue standpoint, but from the way we are as a company standpoint, and it allowed us to work with the other big players in the market.
That deal alone, against objection and against odds, I knew would fundamentally change the organization. Fundamentally. The trajectory of where we were going and what we would do. And that's what it did.
Yeah, it did.
And so that was there were huge potential consequences.
Yeah, we had to invest to be able to handle that business. And if that business went away and we couldn't execute, still stuck with those investments at the end of the day.
So that, the Sam's deal is a great example of something with a high potential consequence. But the number one, deal for failure is things with low potential consequence. You think of an example there?
Low potential consequence? I mean, every day where you get lost in the weeds, where you might have a room of 6 people trying to figure out a $30 charge on an invoice, and the amount of time you wasted on that $30 ends up exponentially higher than the problem that was there to start with.
I'll give you a good example. I actually had this with our CFO. The AR is really important for any organization.
Sure.
Okay. This is a great learned minimalization that I was working on with her. And our CFO has a lot going on in that department. And she had restructured a lot of the department, put new people in. And that AR for any organization, I mean, that's the fuel to the organization. If AR gets hurt, everything gets hurt. One thing that I noticed that was getting bogged down on was she was getting bogged down in some of the just processes that she was trying to implement, and it was jamming up time, and we all have limited time, and so she was really hounding a lot of and putting a lot of emphasis in our credit cards. And our processes and our procedure in the reconciliation of our credit cards. And I talked with her and I said, hey, Carla, I noticed that you're spending a lot of time in this credit card reconciliation area, and really I'm looking at this area of AR that
needs more time,
needs more attention. And I looked at it and said, Carl, I said, I don't want to take away the fact that this area isn't important, but how important is this in the big picture of things? And it gave her time to sit back and reflect. And I said, I know this sounds, but $50,000 really doesn't move the needle in my business.
Yeah.
And when I brought it to her like that, she realized what I was trying to say. It's not that $50,000 didn't matter, but at this point, it really didn't matter.
Yeah, low risk gambits. You just got to contextualize them, and if you contextualize them, you go, like, that really isn't that big of a deal. Are we really arguing where we're going for dinner tonight for half an hour?
But we too often in life get into that arena. Mm-hmm. We too often spend our energy into the things that don't matter. I mean, look, we all have been guilty in relationships, spending so much time arguing on things that don't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll die on hills doing it.
Yes, we will. Yeah.
So we do. Yeah. And then when we die, we're like, what the hell were we thinking?
Was being right that important?
No, but that's the problem. See, that's the problem. You made that statement of being right. See, that's part of our problem. We want to be right.
Mm-hmm.
And people, when we want to be right, we're not effective. I want to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried about if I'm right, because quite often I'm not always right.
Yeah. It's being able to admit that you're not. It's the hardest part to so many people.
Yeah, I'm not. I'd rather be effective.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather learn. My way is not always effective. Many times, when I think my way is not effective, or when I think my way is effective, it's often not.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather sit back and learn that. I had someone, recently come to me and, in a kind of a, business relationship, and as I approached them with a certain way to address a situation, and they came to me and, asked about a different way to address this situation. And I said, I kind of felt like I had a right way, and,
mm-hmm.
and candidly speaking, as I thought about it, might not have been the right way.
Sure.
And, that's the point being is I'm not always right, but I do want to be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting lost in the details is how you become less effective.
And I think this goes back to the minimalization. People who focus on, learn minimalization, understand at the end of the day, they want to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want to be. I want to be effective in life. I want to be effective in relationships. I want to be effective in everything that I do. I'm not going to get them all right. Probably get most of them not right, but I want to get the ones I do get right, and I want to be effective in them.
Coming off the heels of the Super Bowl, one of our features that we do on some episodes is called 4th and Goal. So it's 4th and Goal. Learn minimalism. What's your one zinger piece of advice to share with the audience about something they can do in their daily life to be a little more minimal, a little more intentional about how they live life?
I love our 4th and Goal.
Mm-hmm.
And, we started, this podcast, and, we talked about 4th and Goal because when you're in a 4th and Goal situation, you're put to the test.
Mm-hmm.
You're brought into a situation where you've got to make it happen, right? And so, and leaders understand, that when you're in that situation, that's when you're going to find out who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And true leaders become who they are in those situations. So, at 4th and Goal, in this mentality and this mindset, your job is to clear the paths for everyone else. Your job is to set the tone and to clearly help that team understand this is what we're focused on, to truly identify this is what matters. Whatever the situation is,
mm-hmm.
that's your job. To keep everyone directed on what matters the most and clean out anything that is distracting from the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing more minimal than clarity.
Yeah. That's what a quarterback, if the quarterback is driving that 4th and Goal, it is shutting up the chatter in the huddle
mm-hmm.
and saying, we're going to go score.
Absolutely.
And setting out the clear objectives to how to score, but shutting up the chatter.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks. I think that wraps us up nicely, Andrew.
All right, Matt.
Appreciate it. Good episode.
Thanks for joining us today on the Uncommon CEO podcast. Subscribe to our show wherever you get podcasts. We have video episodes on our YouTube channel and more uncommon wisdom on our social media. Find all our links and resources at uncommonceopodcast.com. For Andrew Smart and all of us here at the Uncommon CEO, stay uncommon.